Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Hawks Latest, your number one source for news, updates, rumors, opinions, and you guessed it, the latest and the greatest regarding the Atlanta Hawks. I'm your host, Zach Langley, aka Langley ATL, and today we've got a packed show. From the ownership's reported interest in Kevin Durant, potentially acquiring him via trade with Phoenix, to Dyson Daniels' unique role at the NBA Finals that was just announced yesterday, a promising pre-draft workout with Chinese standout Hanson Yang, and yes, some chatter about uniforms and nostalgia at the end. So if you're a Hawks fan, trust me, you're going to want to stick around for all of this. So without further ado, let's get right into the biggest story of the week, which is none other than the Hawks' interest in the two-time NBA champ Kevin Durant. So according to a report from Sam Amico of HoopsWire, the Atlanta Hawks are evaluating the possibility of making a blockbuster move for none other than KD himself. While the Hawks are still without a president of basketball operations, ownership has already started the internal discussions that needed to be had before making a deal like this about the potential of targeting KD. It's going to take a lot to get KD, so already starting these preliminary discussions is a good sign in terms of Atlanta's real, chance at getting him. So Amico writes, quote, one league source told HoopsWire not to be surprised if the Hawks get involved in the Kevin Durant sweepstakes. So let's take a look at Kevin Durant's stats from the 2024-2025 NBA season. He averaged 27 points a game, 6 rebounds, 4 assists on 53% from the floor and 43% from three-point. Now, Durant is obviously entering his late 30s. He's been in his late 30s, but he's about to be 40. But he still remains one of the league's most efficient and dangerous scorers, one of the best scorers of all time. In 62 games this past season, he put up numbers that would be, career years for most players ever. He's still elite, and really any contender or aspiring one, which would be where the Atlanta Hawks would fall into, would love to have him. And he would be a great fit alongside Trey. Now, KD does hold a full no-trade clause, so that means any deal would need his personal approval. I don't think he would mind coming to Atlanta. I think that's something he would sign off on, playing with a great young core that Atlanta wouldn't have to absolutely gut in a trade for him. So the question becomes, would Durant actually sign off? And I think he would. It's a fair question, but it seems ownership is at least kicking the tires when it comes to a trade for him. So what would a trade even look like? So the Hawks are in rare position. Like I said, they have the assets without really needing to blow up their young core. And according to some insiders recently, the Suns reportedly are in the market for a center. And in a Kevin Durant trade, they would want the centerpiece to be a center. Well, the Atlanta Hawks have Onyeka Okongwu, who obviously they wouldn't want to trade. However, if you get an opportunity to trade him and other salary for a guy like Kevin Durant, you take that 10 times out of 10. They've also begun to lower their asking price for Durant, which is a real notable development in the Hawks' chances to acquire him. So a package, I guess, built around Onyeka Okongwu, and then obviously we would need to match salaries, so we would have to include obviously like Terrence Mann, Georges Niang, maybe a couple other guys and some picks. That could at least get the conversation started. And then, obviously, with Phoenix's reported interest in acquiring a center, I feel like if the Hawks were to swap out Onyeka Okongwu for Zachary Rizachet, this would also be a strong base point in terms of trade talks with Atlanta and Phoenix. However, it's real difficult to gauge who the Atlanta Hawks would rather keep going forward. Obviously, team fit with Atlanta would be lacking a center. They wouldn't have a center on the roster if they traded away Okongwu. However, the small ball lineups with Jalen at the 5 and KD at the 4 would look really good. It's just not sustainable, and they would need to bring a 5 in. Now, if we included Zach in that package, then you have your starting 5 really locked down. However, you're, getting rid of Zachary Rizachet, who was the last year's number 1 pick, and that's not really a great look for the franchise still. So matching KD's salary is going to be extremely tricky, and that's going to be the most difficult part of all this, and why, a deal at this moment seems super unlikely. His deal runs up to like $55 million annually. However, he is on a 1-year contract. Well, he's on the last year of his contract, so even that provides some risk for Atlanta. And with them already flirting with the luxury tax, you're going to need to get creative. But again, the point here is that ownership is willing to be aggressive, which is something we haven't seen in really all of the Trae Young era. So it's a good sign. And I guess it's a little more notable that ownership is the one that's, really gauging the interest for Kevin Durant instead of the front office. As sad as that may seem, that's the reality with the Atlanta Hawks, that ownership does have more say. Ownership was the real reason for the DeJounte Murray trade going through a couple seasons ago. And that obviously didn't work out, but, if you're talking about bringing in one of the best scorers of all time, then, conversations start to change a little bit. And that would be something that we would all be excited about, and something I certainly would be super excited about. So, on a lighter but very cool note, Dyson Daniels just yesterday had been selected as a player correspondent for Game 3 of the NBA Finals, part of the NBA's recent addition, the NBA's Player Correspondent Program. This initiative allows current NBA players to serve as media correspondents at these major league events, giving fans and anyone tuning in exclusive behind the scenes content at the NBA Finals, and really allows the young player to experience the finals as a whole, and really prepare them for what's to come when they take that next step in their game. Daniels is going to join the likes of, this year, Jared McCain, Jaime Jaquez Jr., and Matas Bucelis to bring direct access and personal insight to NBA digital and social channels, something that everyone's going to be able to keep up with if they want. It's a great opportunity for Dyson to not only show personality and, perhaps even prep for a post-playing career, which is really the goal of the NBA's player correspondent program. It's great to see a Hawks player taking part in a league-wide media initiative. That's something, as Hawks fans, we haven't seen really ever. It's good to have someone that the media really embraces, especially with having 7 years of Trae Young where the media hasn't embraced him. So the Great Barrier Reef is really making the strides in NBA media, and it's cool to see. And speaking of the future, the Hawks actually recently hosted 19-year-old Chinese prospect Hansen Yang for a pre-draft workout. And let's just say, obviously, he turned some heads. So let's look at some Hansen Yang stats. I mean, he led the CBA in blocks per game. He was one of 4 players to average 10, 10, and 2. Impressive numbers as a teenager. He won Defensive Player of the Year at age 18, and he's listed at 7'1", which is obviously necessary in keeping up with the height of today's NBA. If we wanted to take him at either 22 or trade back into the second round, or even take him at 13. I mean, that obviously sounds like a stretch right now. However, he's continuing to rise up draft boards, and if he continues to conduct these pre-draft workouts with teams that have lottery picks, someone may not want to pass on him, especially with the emergence of Nikola Jokic, which is, he's not drawing all comparisons to Nikola Jokic, but this is someone that he has been compared to in the past, and especially more recently as he's been dominating the combine in all of these pre-draft workouts. And that's not for no reason. It's due to his touch, his vision, his screening ability. And honestly, he has much better defensive potential than Jokic. And, it's obviously early to, gauge, his future and expect that kind of leap. But, the foundation is super intriguing. I don't know how insanely well he's going to mesh with Atlanta if they were to draft him, as he, is kind of a slower player. He kind of would slow the pace down and get those backup 5 minutes for Okongwu. But adding a mobile, pass-friendly big to the rotation could be great for Atlanta's long-term front court, and that's something that they're going to put a lot of focus on in the offseason, whether that be in Hansen Yang or anyone else. I mean, there are several centers that they could draft when it comes down to the NBA draft on June 25th. I mean, whether they get him at 13 or 22, around the 13 range, there's going to be Derek Queen, Kaman Maluach. And then at 22, we're talking Danny Wolf, Ryan Kalkbrenner, and maybe Hansen Yang. Who knows? Or Maxime Reynaud, who actually worked out with the Hawks a couple days ago, and we talked about in the last episode. So there's just a lot of things to consider, and we're going to go ahead and just break into something that's happening elsewhere in the league. The Orlando Magic actually recently revealed a new set of uniforms, and it's a modern take on their classic pinstripe era. And while the Magic are leaning into nostalgia, Hawks fans are asking, when's our turn? I mean, I tweeted out your move and then tagged the Atlanta Hawks. They've made some subtle tweaks, I guess, in recent years, and going back over the previous decades. They've kept uniforms for several seasons and then changed, but it's been pretty consistent. There's obviously been no real move towards changing up the uniforms. I think the Hawks have a very nice brand right now, and I don't necessarily want to see them change uniforms. However, these Magic ones look nice, and seeing the Atlanta Hawks kind of embrace that throwback aesthetic could be really cool, and it'd be really awesome moving forward as we move into this new era of Hawks basketball. If they embraced like the iconic Dominique Wilkins era uniforms or the Dikembe Mutombo era throwbacks, that could be something that would be certainly awesome. I mean, I've seen the idea floated around of potentially Atlanta honoring Dikembe Mutombo for all of next season and having their City Edition jersey be a throwback to, not kind of similar to what they did a couple seasons ago with the yellow uniforms where they had the big hawk at the bottom and the font was different and it said Atlanta across the front. It's something like that, but a little more, a little more direct. I mean, Atlanta isn't one of the teams that's supposed to get a throwback jersey next season, but they could, put their own little twist on a City Edition to honor Dikembe Mutombo, and have several commemorative nights around over the course of the season. So, I mean, let us know in the comments. Do you think the Hawks should embrace the high-flying 90s aesthetic? I think they should. I think that'd be super awesome, especially going into this new era. So that's all for today's edition of Hawks Latest. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive as we continue to pump out videos every single day. And let's keep the conversation going in the comments. Would you trade for Kevin Durant? Who would you trade for Kevin Durant? Are you excited about potentially drafting Hanson Yang? And should the Hawks bring back the classics? I'm Zach Langley. As always, go Hawks. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.